Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party wins Canada's national election. What does it mean for the country and beyond? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party won Canada's national election on Monday. Just a few months ago, the Liberals appeared headed for a major defeat at the hands of the Conservatives. Then came US President Trump's annexation threats and trade war. For more, let's turn now to CGTN's Dan Williams. He's in Ottawa. So Dan, talk to us about the issues at stake in this election and the impact of President Trump.
Yeah, heading into 2025, for most Canadians, the real focus was around cost of living. It was around the housing affordability crisis. The carbon tax was another deeply unpopular element for many Canadians. But that all changed at the start of the year with the election of the US President Donald Trump. We started to see the attacks on Canada's sovereignty that, again, calling back then the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, Governor Trudeau, suggesting that Canada should become the 51st US states, but of course also the reality of these the trade dispute, the trade war, these tariffs across a whole host of Canadian goods and exports. 2/3 of Canada's exports go to the United States, and every economist seems to suggest that if these tariffs remain in place for any length of time, they will be deeply impactful for Canada. So those elements together, not forgetting though, of course, Justin Trudeau stepping aside, Mark Carney taking over as leader of the Liberal Party. So those three elements all together really seemingly the key reason for this incredible turnaround in fortunes for the Liberal Party, turning over plus 20-point lead for the Conservative Party at the beginning of the year to now a minority government for the Liberals at this election. And one other little point to make, Trump and Carney have had their first conversation, Trump congratulating Carney with becoming Prime Minister, and we understand that they will be having talks soon, and there'll be many, many people, many voters today that will, of course, be hoping that that is a good sign for the future.
And Dan, not only did the Conservative Party lose, but its leader, Pierre Poilievre, lost his seat in Parliament. So where do things stand right now? Does the Liberal Party have an outright majority?
Well, that's take one of those points at a time. Certainly in terms of the Conservatives, they made some big gains, it has to be said. As you say, the big disappointment will, of course, be the fact that they were ahead in the polls by more than 20 points for the best part of 2 years and didn't get over the line. But the other big question, of course, now is what next for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative leadership. There is, of course, the potential that another MP could step aside. They could run a by-election and he could take that seat potentially. But that would also mean the Conservatives had to name an interim head in the meantime. So there are some questions for the Conservatives there. The one element from that they will be taking away from this, though, are the big gains. The Conservatives really did make some big gains on the night, not least in Toronto's 905 region, which is very important. So there will be a lot of positives for the Conservatives, despite the overall disappointment. In terms of the Liberals, well, yeah, they just fell short of that, securing that majority. They needed 172 out of 343 seats. They just falling a bit short there, 169 seats they're projected now to win. There are a couple of recounts, but it would seem as though it is going to be a minority government for them, and that will mean that they will need to garner the support of some of the other political parties. In the short term, of course, the big question that we've been talking about is how to deal with the United States and Donald Trump. And all of the parties were pretty much united on that question. So in the short term, it would be unlikely that there'd be any major sway away from that, be a fairly united front. It's just more on those other issues right at the beginning that we were perhaps talking about, cost of living, some of the other issues around taxation that could be where we start to see some of the splits, and that will be really one of the areas that Mark Carney will be perhaps questioning, perhaps he is a political novice. That would be some of the areas that will be of concern for him.
Thanks, Dan. That's CGTN's Dan Williams reporting from Ottawa. Well, there's much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Ian Lee is an associate professor at Carleton University's Sprott School of Business. Frank Sesno served as CNN's Washington bureau chief. He's currently a professor and director of strategic initiatives at George Washington University School of Media and Public Affairs. Also with us is Laurie Williams. She's an associate professor of economics, justice and policy studies at Mount Royal University. And Yves Engler is a Montreal-based author and activist. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Yves, let me start with you. This was an astonishing turnaround for the Liberal Party and its leader, Mark Carney. I mean, as we just heard, just a few weeks ago, they were 20 points behind. Now he's won. How did they do it?
Well, I think the public was offered the option of going for a Trump-like figure or sticking with the status quo. And despite lots of sort of discomfort with the Liberals over the past decade, they chose to stick with the status quo. Basically, Donald Trump's very unpopular. And Poilievre was mimicking Trump much too much for most people's liking. And he wasn't able to sort of pivot away from this sort of hard right-wing ideological kind of position that he's been taking, and the public decided that they didn't want that option, and obviously people are very fearful of Donald Trump's threats, and people are looking at what Trump's doing in the U.S. in terms of attacking universities and expelling people from the country and gutting government and public services, and they decided that they'll stick with the status quo Liberals, who are, you know, a bit less aggressive in terms of their pro-business than the Conservative Party.
Right, and Yves, as we heard from our reporter, the Liberals did not get an outright majority. They are 3 seats short. So who's likely to be part of the ruling coalition?
I would guess the likely is what the government's been, which is a Liberal minority with the support of the NDP. The NDP, the traditional Social Democratic Party, got basically almost wiped out, but they still have 7 seats, so they still have the balance of power. And my guess is that there'll be some sort of informal coalition, as there's been going on, this agreement that they had previously. And, you know, to be fair, there's some positives that came from that agreement: dental care, pharma care, some expansion of social entitlements that were.
I'm afraid we've lost Yves there. We'll try to get back to him. Frank Sesno, good to see you, Frank. Now let's listen to some of Mark Carney's victory speech, in which he talks about the relationship between Canada and the United States. Let's watch.
Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over.
So, Frank, I think it's fair to say that these are 2 countries. They're on the same continent. They joined at the hip. They have the longest border in the world. It's an undefended border as well. And when Carney says this relationship, as it stands right now, is over, what does that mean? I mean, how seismic a shift is this?
It is a huge seismic shift. It is almost impossible to put into words how significant this is, because we're talking about the United States and Canada here, best friends, best neighbors, best allies, best trading partners for decades, in some ways for hundreds of years. I had the benefit of being with some Canadians about a week and a half ago, and the thing that struck me in that conversation is they said, this is not just a moment's problem, this is going to be a long-lasting problem. We're not going to forget this. You see more Canadian flags now. You hear Buy Canada. People are canceling their trips to America. So this is a consequence of Donald Trump's populism and politics. He plays, by definition, to the home team. When you play to the home team, you don't care about the other teams. And that's what is projected here. And it's not unique to Canada. It's expressed itself in Canada's elections very dramatically here. What an incredible political turnaround for Carney. But from Australia to the United Kingdom and other places where the United States has had alliances because of a variety of things, from tariffs to the president's position on Ukraine and Russia, these relationships have been upended. And Carney's words, our old relationship is over, may not be what others are saying explicitly, though many are, but it's certainly what they're thinking and projecting.
Laurie Williams, Mark Carney is a central banker, former central banker, I should say. He is an economist with extensive experience in finance. The US and Canada are each other's biggest trading partners. So when he talks about this relationship being over, I mean, how does he navigate this envisaged breakup? These, as Frank just pointed out, are the closest of allies.
Well, his essential point is that Donald Trump is unpredictable and cannot be counted on. And so Canada has to try to do what it can within its own borders and in relationship with other countries to try to grow the economy in a way that's insulated to some degree from whatever ups and downs might come from the United States. So there are a lot of trading barriers between and amongst provinces. Many provinces have worked together to try to diminish those. There's talk about a trans-Canadian energy corridor that could include things like a pipeline and electricity grids and so forth. Sharing hydroelectric power and other things. And Mark Carney said that he wants to try to make Canada the greatest energy superpower in the world. So he's got really ambitious goals in terms of what he'd like to see happen in growing the Canadian economy, but the challenges are going to be significant. And you know, we have a lot of economic interrelationship, a lot of reciprocity going on between the two countries, but that is in flux at this point, and not knowing where that's going to go or when it's going to change or how means that Canada has to do the best it can to manage independently. Now, having said all of that, there is a conversation that's begun between Mark Carney and Donald Trump about what the agreement between Canada and the United States be, what the trade rules might be. All of that has to be set against the background of the fact that the current trade deal with Canada and the United States was negotiated by Donald Trump, and he has broken several elements of that already.
Ian Lee, President Trump, you know, he's been saying something very often. You know, he believes that the United States has, for a very long time, been getting a raw deal in the world, not just from Canada, but from many other countries, almost all other countries in the world. I mean, in this instance, he says that the United States is paying for Canada's survival. Let's listen to him.
It's costing us $200 billion a year to support Canada. $200 billion. And I say, why are we doing that? You know what? We can make our own cars. We have more energy than they do. We have more energy than anybody in the world. We don't need their lumber, obviously. We have more lumber. We have a lot of lumber. We have a lot of everything that they sell us.
So, Ian, domestically, what will Carney's priorities be? I mean, the country is technically in a recession, to quote the International Economic Outlook report. And the Globe and Mail, rather, in Canada, one of Canada's major newspapers, says lessening dependence on the United States will be, in its words, hellishly complicated.
Well, I agree. The late Professor Aaron Wodowski, who was at UC Berkeley, famously said that a conservative is a liberal who was mugged the night before on his own street, in his own residential neighborhood. I think that Prime Minister Carney is going to be mugged by economic reality. Just to put some numbers for everybody on the table, the trade between the two countries is $1 trillion a year. Now, the idea that you can just take $1 trillion of thousands and thousands and thousands of companies on both sides of the border who are trading with each other out of their own mutual self-interest, because that's what trade is, and somehow the Prime Minister's office can put that all on a boat or an airplane and send it over to Europe or send it over to Asia and just pretend that the United States isn't there anymore, is just preposterous. Okay, it's preposterous. And just to unpack that a bit more, trade, and I've been teaching strategy for 38 years, and I'm a former banker myself, lending to small and medium-sized businesses. Trade is micro and granular. That is, it occurs at the level of the firm trading with another firm. This is first-year micro and macroeconomics. In other words, there's nobody in the Prime Minister's office like the Wizard of Oz at the end of the Wizard of Oz who's manipulating a machine that's saying, okay, company A, you send, a couple of $1 million over to that country over there called France, and this company B, you go over there. That's not how trade works. Trade is at the micro level of the firm, and it's firm to firm. It's not president to prime minister. Now, of course, tariffs can affect that. Of course, the environment of a country can affect the trade, but it is initiated by firms, not by presidents and prime ministers. So, and I'm not suggesting we won't be diversifying our trade. And to your question, yes, he is counting on energy to diversify and sell, for example, liquefied natural gas to Asia, to Japan, which has been banging on our door for it, as well as South Korea, as well as Germany. So there will be opportunities to diversify and send natural resources to these other parts of the world, principally Asia and Europe. But the idea that we're going to stop trading where we share 8,800-kilometer border, longest border in the world shared with another country, and all our trade is north-south from U.S. to Canada, Canada to U.S., and somehow that's all going to just vanish and just disappear is beyond delusional. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because companies trade, it's in their self-interest to trade with their American counterparts. And so that's why this trade agreement has to be renegotiated, and that's why Carney has to get down to Washington and start negotiating with President Trump, because it's in the mutual self-interest, as the business class are saying in the United States, the Chamber of Commerce, etc., as are the business class in Canada. So we have to look at what the business class and the business people are saying, and not just what the Prime Minister is saying about how it's broken and we're never going to be dealing with the U.S. again. It's one of those things, it's a political comment that doesn't have a substantial economic reality.
All right, let me go to Yves Engler. Yves, what are your thoughts on how Carney not breaks off completely, but I guess dilutes this relationship? I mean, he has said that Canada is ready to take on, and I'm quoting him here, a leadership role in building a coalition of like-minded countries who share Canada's values. How do you see that play out?
Well, this is rhetoric. This is rhetoric because most Canadians are uncomfortable with the U.S. Let's look at really simple things. Right now, Canada's participating in the U.S.-Filipino military exercise, which is targeting China. You have Canadian naval vessels that are going alongside U.S. naval vessels, as they've been doing for decades. That's all continuing. You have Canadians, officers in the U.S. military exchange programs. You have Canada part of the Five Eyes. You have Canada part of NORAD. You have Canada part of a whole system of U.S. military power projection around the world. And if you were even modestly serious about lessening relationship to the U.S., you would question those things. You would stop purchasing.
Well, I've lost Yves again. Frank, I want to continue to talk about some of the points that Yves Engler raised there. I mean, do you think that Carney's efforts to move away from the United States will extend to things like security? As Yves pointed out, they're both members of NATO. They both have these collective defense obligations. They also cooperate on continental defense with the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD as it's known. That's the world's only binational command, by the way, and also they are part of the Five Eyes intelligence network.
And I want to answer that question with a little bit of an analogy that might be a little strange, right? So you're an investor. You have a portfolio of stocks and other things, and the market crashes. Some people say sell everything and get out. Most don't do that. They ride it out, but they diversify their portfolio. They look hard and they say, do we need to sell some of this and buy a little more gold or something else to protect ourselves against volatility? We're in a marketplace of politics and ideas that is, if nothing else, exceptionally volatile. What Canada is saying, what I hear Carney is saying, is not that we're going to sell everything. We're not going to shut down the trade across the border. They can talk tough, but they know they can't do that. They're going to try to diversify the portfolio. Years ago, when the Keystone Pipeline was a big issue, Canada said, well, maybe we'll build a pipeline to the West Coast and we'll diversify and we'll sell to Asia, whatever, if the United States tanks on us. So what this is sort of an extreme moment where the Canadians are looking hard at the relationship with the United States and the kind of commerce across the board they can do and how they'll have to diversify. Yes, they're both still members of NATO. Yes, they're both still members of the G7 and the industrialized countries. Mm-hmm. Yes, global trade, hobbled and distorted as it is right now, is going to reconfigure because people want to buy and sell goods, and that's what's going to happen. So this is I think what defines this moment, as was said earlier, is the volatility, unpredictability, and unreliability that the United States is now seen in. That Donald Trump negotiates a NAFTA agreement, and then he rips it up with little warning and little rationale, except, whatever suits the moment. And so that's where Carney and the others are going to have to adjust. I do not see NATO falling apart, at least not in the short term, unless Trump turns there.
We lost Frank there as well. I'm going to get back to Yves. Yves, I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to finish that thought you had.
Yeah, you would stop this relationship. The subservient Canadian support for the U.S. empire. They haven't moved on any of this stuff, right? And this would be the simple thing if you're talking about lessening relationship with the U.S. But Carney's not serious about that because the business class, the capitalist elite in Canada want, as Ian Lee has made it very clear already on our discussion, they want to just do trade with the U.S. and be subservient with the U.S. This is not necessarily what most Canadians want right now. Most Canadians polls actually show that Canadians' attitudes towards the U.S. are on par with Russia. Well, with Russia, we have sanctions. We have a whole elaborate process of disconnecting from Russia. Yeah. And this is the direction, if you were at all serious about backing away from the U.S., that Carney would go.
Yeah. Laurie Williams, to what extent was this election a referendum, not just on Canada's domestic economic and trade policies, but also on the relationship with the United States?
Certainly that played into it. I think there are a couple of things. If I could just first say that the distressing sort of information about the relationship between Canada and the United States around trade and even the respect for Canadian sovereignty has to do with, of course, with the Trump administration. And there are really strong and valuable relationships between and amongst Canadians and Americans, relationships of family and commerce and various other things that I think are treasured by people on both sides of the border. The election had two sort of main things that shifted the polls, as you've described earlier. One is that Justin Trudeau, who was very unpopular, stepped down, was basically forced to step down, and a leadership race was held to bring Mark Carney to the prime ministership leadership of the Liberal Party. And then Donald Trump was elected and began these attacks on Canada. So that combination of things led to people looking to the future and trying to figure out what's most important to them in the future. And although all Canadians are concerned about affordability and jobs and other things in common, they had different views about what the best way to manage the economy, to manage affordability, to provide jobs, housing, and so forth. And they kind of divided as to which leader they thought would be the best at providing that. And that's where Mark Carney was able to win back some of the folks that had formerly been willing to support the Liberals but had defected to other parties. So it was very much about the combination of threats from the United States, and to some degree, those who defected from other parties and joined the Liberals or loaned their votes to the Liberals, perhaps, went to the Liberals essentially because they were afraid not just of Donald Trump, but in some cases also of Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the opposition.
Ian Lee, there have been some comments from Donald Trump, especially in terms of the business relationship between the United States and Canada, which some may regard as being extreme. For instance, Donald Trump said that the cars that are manufactured in Canada, aluminium manufactured there, steel, that should come to the United States, should leave Canada and come to the United States. I mean, how are those kinds of issues going to be resolved?
It's going to be very difficult because I agree with Yves and Laurie and Frank that the mood in Canada is unbelievably angry towards Mr. Trump, President Trump. And so if a deal, and I do believe a deal will be struck, will be negotiated because it's in the mutual self-interest of both countries, but it's going to be very difficult to sell it, if you will, in the court of public opinion in Canada because of this extraordinary anger towards the U.S. And of course, there's going to be questions of whether, you know, Mr. Trump will sustain the deal or will he abrogate that too. And then on top of that, there's going to be, I think, there's going to have to be some very serious compromises made by Canada. We're going to have to give up some protected industries like supply management and the exclusion of American telecom firms from Canada, airlines, banking, that sort of thing. So it's going to be a real challenge to get the political approval of this. And one more quick point I want to get before I run out of time. Nobody's brought up in all the conversations I've noticed this today across Canada. Some people are talking about the decisive victory by the Liberals, and I'm not here to put down Mr. Carney. It's a great victory.
Yeah.
He won by 2 percentage points. This was not, anyone who says that the election has been determined, it is not. We are badly divided. There's 2% difference between the Liberal government that got elected and the Conservative government that lost by, the Conservative Party that lost by 2 percentage points. There is no consensus on Carney's vision, which is for much greater government intervention, and the Conservative model or proposal of much smaller government intervention, of downsizing the government. And so we're going to have another election because we have not settled this issue. This issue is still up in the air, and there's going to be an election. It won't go for 4 years.
I need to get
a year, maybe 2 years.
Right, I need to get Frank Sesno very quickly. Frank, I've only got a minute left, but what do we make of Donald Trump's repeated, references to making Canada the 51st state of the United States? I mean, Mark Carney says this is about going after Canada's vast natural resources. But now that Mark Carney has won, is that put to rest?
The White House repeated it today again. It's not put to rest. And I think one of the things we've seen with Donald Trump is nothing is ever put to rest. What do we make of it? It's very hard to say. This country there's no popular support for taking over Canada. The United States is not going to invade Canada. Where does this go? How would this proceed? So it's harassment at least, and it's scoring political points and putting political pressure on to do the deal, because after all, President Trump sees himself as the author of the art of the deal. So perhaps that's what this is all about, but it's much more disruptive than just a throwaway soundbite.
Yeah. Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.